Okay, welcome. I'm going to talk about some food web, food chain, and energy, how those three kind of relate to each other in our ecosystems unit here. So energy and food chains and food webs. So the first thing I want to define is a couple of things here. Obviously the sun. The sun is the ultimate source of energy for our Earth and for any ecosystem on Earth. We have a term called producers. Producers are also known as autotrophs. Basically, they create their own food. So generally, this is done through photosynthesis. Another term then we use is consumer, which is another term for a heterotroph, which means it consumes organisms for energy, so basically eats things. And then we have this term respiration, or cell respiration, that we use with that. Now, we're going to focus on how energy flows through a food web here today. So the first thing is I want to just talk about a food chain and how some of the terms in the food chain work. So food chain, you follow the arrows. The arrows point to where energy is being sent to, okay, or where the energy is being passed on to. So the sun here, the sun passes energy on to the producers. The producers pass their energy on to what we call consumers. The primary consumer would be the first level. The second level would be a secondary consumer. And third level would be a tertiary consumer. So primary, secondary, tertiary. Heat is lost through each one of these steps. So these organisms, consumers, they produce body heat, so therefore there's going to be heat lost to the environment for those organisms. So that's where we talk about how energy flows. It flows from the sun through these food chains to basically the top of the food chain. Along the way, energy is always being lost. Okay, so the first thing, if I have three example food chains here, and in the black I have producers, this area here is all consumers, and it's starting with the sun for each one of these. So in this case, we go from the sun to grass, to a cricket, to a bird, to a hawk. So the hawk eats the bird eats the cricket eats the grass, and the grass gets energy from the sun. A second food chain would be an example of going from the sun to a tree, to a deer, to wolves. And then the third example would be going from sun to grass, to rabbit, to a hawk. So again, in this bottom one, the hawk eats the rabbit eats the grass. These are all considered producers because they get energy directly from the sun, which they produce energy then. And so here would be examples of primary consumers, secondary consumers, and then the tertiary would be the hawk. Notice the hawk is under secondary and tertiary consumers. So I'm going to take these three food chains now, and I'm going to build a food web. So food web, in this case, would look like this. We have the sun, and the sun produces energy. It gives off energy to the grass and the tree. Now, this can all get pretty complicated when you start adding these food chains in together, but if you follow this through, we go from the sun to the tree to the deer to the wolf, just like on our previous example. Or the sun to grass, grass to cricket, cricket to bird, bird to hawk, as in our first example. So food web is a combination of all these different food chain possibilities. And there's probably things I'm missing here, but you hopefully get the idea. If we had more food chains, we'd have more organisms on there. So that leads us back to how nutrients cycle. Now, we just talked about food webs and how energy is lost. So on each one of those arrows on the previous slide, energy is lost between those organisms. So energy is lost in this system where nutrients cycle. So in the food web, those organisms that die eventually go to decomposers. Decomposers return those nutrients back into the food web, and that cycle repeats. Now, if we look at how energy flows through here, the sun gives energy to the producers, and there's a little bit of heat lost there. Producers, like plants, provide oxygen and glucose for consumers. So when you eat a salad, for example, you're eating plants, which is made up mostly of glucose. You also get oxygen from the plants because they give off oxygen. So as consumers, we give off heat. So our body heat is a way that we lose. We just lose that heat to the environment. Okay, and that can't be really regained in any way. Same thing with over here. So then these producers and consumers cycle back and forth. Consumers then use that oxygen and glucose to produce CO2 and water, which the producers use. And this cycle repeats over and over. Now, if you look at this whole part as a system here, we see that energy comes in, but we have energy leaving also. So we have energy leaving in the heat lost portion, but we also have energy at the consumer level. So all consumers produce this molecule called ATP, which is cell energy. So this is the net gain that we get from this. We lose a bunch of heat to our environment and our surroundings, but we gain this ATP molecule, which is extremely important, and we'll learn more about as we get into the cellular structure. That's it. Make sure you go on and take the quiz for this video.